Good morning and welcome to Bible Baptist Church. I'm glad you've chosen to worship with us today. Let's go right on in and begin our time of worship.
Let's stand together as we sing Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Let's continue singing about angels this morning. Angels we have heard on high. sing We Three Kings of Orient are. And after that, we're going to have a special by Ron Getz.
Favorite Christmas carols, most well-known Christmas songs, do come from other countries, and this is a very old Christmas song that was translated from a French poem that was written in the mid-1800s, probably around 1847, 1850, so a song that's over 170 years old, probably. It's very difficult sometimes to translate languages word for word. But in the French, this song would have been translated into English, something along the lines of, "At midnight, Christians," and we know it as "O Holy Night." led by the light of the stars so brightly gleaming, here came the wise men from Orient land. A thrill all through the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and cloudless morn. Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angel voices, oh, night divine, oh, night when Christ was born, oh, night divine, holy night, oh, night divine.
This is the story of a ragtag bunch of church members who set out to perform a Christmas play, and the director who tried his hardest to just keep it all together. The glory of Christmas.
There's a little bit of controversy over my choice to cast Tony as the wise man in our church nativity play, because, well, Tony can sometimes be...
Yep, that's some good birch.
Birch? Why would they use birch? It's not even indigenous to Israel.
Tony's just a little bit of a know-it-all.
Did acacia not even cross your mind?
That's probably birch.
Potato salad is of German origin, brought over here by European settlers. You know, fascinating point. The carb load on that is 37 grams. Great for marathon runners.
There's no doubt that Tony knows a lot of useless facts. But when he doesn't know something,
Now, of all the wise men's gifts, myrrh was the most profound. It was used to prepare a body for burial.
What does real myrrh smell like?
I imagine it has like a lush floral scent.
Nah, it's woodsy. Warm, aromatic, musky.
Oh, my mom leads the essential oils small group.
but there's a certain something about Tony. Something that he doesn't even see about himself.
Put your shoulder into it so it doesn't strip the head.
That's like,
Hey, well done. That's good. Good job.
Tony has the kind of heart that understands where the real treasures are. What they are, who they are. And he understands the King of Kings came first as the lowly servant.
This baby, this beautiful gift, is the glory of God, the glory of Christmas, who would eventually sacrifice himself for us. For me, well, let's just say, with that kind of knowledge, you can never approach the manger quite the same way again.
That's why he's the wise man.
song. I hope your Christmas season has started well and starting to maybe kick into high gear. We're, a week from this Friday is Christmas Day. If that spooks you, I'm sorry, it's a reality. Last night, Leanne and I drove down to Searcy and we went to a drive-through nativity. We waited in line about an hour and 10 minutes, and it took 7 minutes to drive through the nativity. And of course, over an hour, it was well worth it. It was a good time, and they just did a great job at First Assembly in Searcy. And I think last night was the last night of it. Tonight is the last night of it. It's beautiful. They really just do a great job. They're all outside. They've got, it looks like you're driving down through a dirt street of Bethlehem, and different shops going and everything like that, and a number of live animals, and all the people were live, and so that's a good thing. And it was just a really, really nice, very well done, and they had a link that you could log on to with your phones to a YouTube video that would narrate the whole story. They just did a great job, and so I hope you're looking for things like that to plug into and do. The backwards parade or the inverse parade that we had in town, I thought was excellent. I thought they did a good job. I appreciate all the people that worked on that, and I just like those Christmas lights. I like the shooting the snowballs is my favorite one, but they're all good. They're shooting presents, isn't it? But I enjoy all of those. And I hope you've enjoyed the videos that we've shown, even though we had a little bit of trouble with that today. And help us to try to focus on that true meaning of Christmas, the glory of Christmas. And appreciate, I know we paid them, but I'm glad that they are people out there that put together these types of products for us to use in the church and to enjoy and to celebrate. I think it enhances our Christmas experience beyond even what we could do on our own. Remember, when we talk about that word glory, we're really talking about trying to give something significance or weight or importance. And so when we talk about the glory of God and the glory of Christmas, we realize we're celebrating God for all the great things that He's done for us. And we're making this holiday significant because of what it means. The coming of the Christ child. The plan of redemption is in full force. You know, I tell my Bible classes quite frequently, Jesus is not plan B. The Old Testament wasn't a mistake. God didn't mess up. Nothing failed. And Jesus had to come and fix the problem. Jesus was the solution to the problem that we caused in Adam and Eve's sin and all of humanity from the very beginning. And the Old Testament is proclaiming the redemption that is coming, giving us a sense of hope and longing for that. And the birth of Christ means that period of waiting is over, and now the glory of God is breaking forth for us. You know, the Gospel of John, which doesn't tell us the Christmas story at all, but yet tells us something magnificent. It says that we beheld His glory, and His glory was wrapped in flesh and begun to dwell among us. And that's that idea that we have that really Christ is the embodiment of the glory of God and of the greatness of God. And so we should really try to push back on Christmas and not let it get tangled up too much in our hearts and minds with commercialism, but rather give due deference to the glory of God. And we want to praise Him and help us to focus our attention on that. Today, as we turn our attention to the wise men, we're jumping over to the Gospel of Matthew, which includes the story of the wise men in Matthew chapter 2. And there are these Gentile kings that travel a long distance so that they could honor this Jewish-born king. It tells us that they saw a star appear in the sky, and they interpreted that to mean that a king had been born, and they came to honor that king, to adore him, and to worship him. Now we know the text is very plain that these were all wise men. There were no wise women that were involved in this. Now, that doesn't suggest there weren't any wise women. We just know there weren't any wise women in this story because they would have stopped and asked for directions earlier, arrived on time, brought sensible gifts, helped clean up a little bit. No, 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 no. It's men. They show up late and try to appease it with extravagant gifts, all right? There's no question about that. I apologize. I get once a year to tell that joke. And I just won't give up. We're in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all of the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word, so that I too may come and worship him. And after listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to the east over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child, to destroy him. And he rose and took the child and his mother by night, and departed to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, Out of Egypt I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children of Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. This is the word of the Lord. In this passage, one of the things that I try to pick up from and try to remember myself is the great comparison between Herod, who by all means, he's even known historically as Herod the Great, and he's recognized as one of the great kings. If you go to Israel today, and if you have Jewish leaders in the city of Jerusalem and in the area, they will date everything by Herod the Great, because he's the central figure in this time period for all of the history of Judaism. Now, obviously, when you're led by Christians, they're going to date it to the time of Christ. I know they coincide a little bit, but he was really a great king, and he did many wonderful things. He improved the infrastructure of the nation like you cannot even imagine. He is the one who really established and expanded the Roman road system all through the country of Jerusalem, all through the country of Israel, I should say. He just did wonderful things. He built Jerusalem. Israel doesn't have a natural port because it doesn't have a river at all that goes along the coastline. And so Herod, he just had his engineers build a big giant levee out across into the ocean with cement that is hydraulic cement, hardens underwater. He just had him build a port from scratch. Most of us wouldn't have any idea how to even begin with that. And he expanded and made Jerusalem truly a great city. He expanded the Temple Mount. The second temple that's talked about as being beautiful and magnificent with its marble outside walls and its ornate golden crown and the golden overlaid doors, all those are the work of Herod and his finances and his organization. Really, the second temple is properly known as Herod's temple because he is the one who financed and pushed his engineers to spend more than 40 years remodeling the temple and the Temple Mount and made Jerusalem a fine example of a Roman city. Not as large, not as magnificent as the great cities of Rome or Ephesus or Corinth, but by its own standards, a magnificent, magnificent city. Not only that, Herod built fortresses for himself and for the glory of Israel all over the nation. And he was just a man, he was great because he was so powerful of all of that. And even though he wasn't always the best ruler, he always seems to do what pushes the country forward and what builds his reputation. In his mind, I really think in his mind, he wanted to be known as a king greater than David. He wanted to be known as a king greater than Solomon because of the way that he approached with his military and his building ventures. He has to be pulling that straight out of the United Monarchy, straight out of the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, to make a great name for himself by becoming the greatest king that Israel had ever had. But you know what? There's some bad news about Herod as well. Even though he did many great things for the people, that's really undeniable. If you go and visit Israel today, you'll see Herod's the evidence of Herod's greatness and his work from the very northern part of the country to the very southern part of the country. And Jerusalem is a jewel, all because of the work of Herod. But when you look at Herod's lifestyle, and you look at Herod's family relationships, and you look at the way that Herod ruled his kingdom, you'll realize that oftentimes he was nothing more than a common thug. He was a person that used deception and manipulation as his primary tools of motivation. And we see that. We see that here in this story. Look at verses 7 and 8. Herod summoned the wise men secretly, and he ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him." He is manipulating the wise men. He's pumping them for the information that he needs in case things don't go very well. He doesn't have any intention of fulfilling what he says in verse 8 when he says that he wants to go and to worship the Christ child. He is threatened by the naming of another king in his country, and he is going to do what he had done to many other people in his life. He's going to snuff them out because they're a problem. Now there's a saying about Herod the Great that's attributed to Caesar Augustus, who we know is the Roman Caesar at this time. We cannot verify the saying with other historical literature, but Josephus, I believe, mentions that Caesar said, "You were better off being Herod's pig than you were his son." Right? Now the words pig and son sound very similar in Greek. They're almost homophones. Hus and huios. And he said that because Herod wouldn't eat pork. So if you were a pig, you were probably safe in his kingdom. But if you were his son and you became a threat, he'd put you down. We know he killed more than one of his sons because either allegedly they were trying to take over their father's throne before he had died, or they might have been literally trying to do that. Not only that, you probably weren't even better off being one of his wives either, because he put a couple of his wives to death as well. He was horrible at this. Like I said, many times, he's nothing more than a mere thug. You know, it's funny that Herod is threatened by this boy king that we know as Jesus. To be perfectly honest, Jesus had no desire, nor was it ever God's plan, that Jesus would be a king like Herod. He wasn't going to be a mere puppet ruler for the Romans like Herod was. Jesus was, in fact, before he was even born, king of the universe. And nothing that Herod could have done then or anyone could do afterwards is going to change that. Herod's comment in verse 8 that he wants to go and worship the boy Jesus is nothing more than false piety and blasphemy that's being brought before the very throne of the king. Jesus will see through all of the pretenses of not Herod dies before he gets any older, but of all of the others that try to get something from him, he will see through all of the pretenses. And we need to recognize Jesus as our king today as well. Too many people try to be like Herod. They claim they want to really honor him at Christmas. They claim they really want to worship him and put Christ the center of their life while it's decoration and while it's exciting and while we get all of the gift giving. But then when the presents are unwrapped and the decorations are put away, the true reality of how we honor Jesus as our King really comes out in our lives. We fail and we forget. We are just like Herod in that way when we use deception and manipulation to draw attention to ourselves or our needs at Christmas, but then the whole rest of the year we no more honor him as king than we do anything else. Not only is he deceptive and manipulative, but he also is abusive of the power and authority that he has. Look down at verses 16, 17, and 18. And here we have this part of the Christmas story that we frequently want to leave out of the Christmas story. That this passage that's known as the slaughter of the innocents. Do you realize that in the days following the birth of Jesus, all of the other male children that had been born in that area during that same time are taken out and slaughtered by Herod's forces? Do you realize that many people are going to remember the slaughter of the innocents as the years and decades go by that live in that area, but they will have no knowledge whatsoever of that Jesus that comes from that area? They will mourn more about that than they will about his crucifixion and his death for them. Do you see the irony that's there? He abuses his power and authority. Herod, I love the verse here. It says, later on in that, where he says, verse 16, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men. Herod hadn't been tricked by the wise men. He was outdone by the throne of heaven. Because the throne of heaven is what sent the wise men on their way. The wise men aren't involved in any kind of divisive game or game of deception. They told the truth all the way through this. They were obedient to the Lord. Herod was outdone by the throne of heaven. The slaughter of the innocents. It's a horrible part of the story. I've joked in the past that all of our nativity scenes are incomplete because there's no real mention or inclusion of the slaughter of the innocents. And I understand why we wouldn't want that there. But the reality is that the slaughter of the innocents reminds us that Jesus' life and his death came to pay the penalty for the slaughter that had been taking place since Adam and Eve's sin. And the slaughter that continues as we give our lives over to sin and death, to the foolishness and the falseness. And so if it's not right there beside it, we're failing to really see the powerful image that we have. In verse 3, still talking about Herod, not just using manipulation, not just abusing power and authority, but here we see in verse 3 the real source of Herod's power. And the real source of all those who wield power like Herod. It's fear. They use fear to get their way. And so Herod's threatening and manipulation all the way through this is his vain attempts to gain and maintain the limited power that he has. That's purely based on fear. And when they realize those who rule by fear live in fear. Because if fear is all they have to rule, then what they fear is someone greater than them, someone more powerful than them, that will take that power away from them. That's what Herod's operating on from the very beginning. He's afraid. When he hears about this child, and he hears that it's been the new king that's going to be born, he's afraid. He's intimidated. He's taunted by that. How in the world can he be afraid of a child? But yet he is. Because he's living and ruling by fear, and so he is always afraid. So we have Herod as this kind of wise guy, if you will, this thug. On the other hand, we have the wise men. And look at what the wise men do. In verse 3, they do something very good right there. They ask other people for advice. They listen to the advice of others. They seek it out. And they do kind of sift through it and make a decision about what they should do. But a wise person always seeks out advice. A wise person doesn't assume that they know everything already, or they're a wise person so they can make a wise decision, but rather their wisdom leads them to count on the counsel of other people. There's a great story, just a little bit, few little lines of a story from some of the writings of the rabbis from Jesus' day and time. And in this passage here, which is kind of the name of the chapter is the wisdom of the fathers. That's in this Jewish book. And in this book it says there are 4 kinds of students. There's the funnel, there's the sponge, there's the sieve, and there's the sifter. And then it goes on to explain the student that's the funnel, that's in one end and immediately right out the other end. Right? Goes in one ear and it goes out the other end. The sponge, they soak up everything, but once you set them down, everything then drains out of them. Then there's the sieve. The sieve here that they're talking about is a tool that was used in the manufacture of wine. And it's what the wine is poured through to get all of the last bits of the pulp and the skin and the seeds and all of the other dregs of the wine, all of the heavy stuff left over from the yeast, from the fermentation. It's the sieve. But this student is the one that focuses on the sieve and talks about all of the impurities of the teacher and all the mistakes that the teacher has made. And puts so much emphasis on that, they don't pay any attention to the good stuff that's going on at the same time. And then it finally talks about the sifter. And this is the sift that was used in the making of bread. And this is the student that takes the rough ground flour and sifts it out and saves the fine flour and collects it and makes a good loaf of bread to feed his whole family. And wise men are sifters. They've realized that there are bad things that happen. There are things that are not significant. There are things we should just let ignore. But there's also things and truths that we need to capture. And we need to pay attention to. And we need to devote our efforts into those things. They not only seek advice from others, but in verses 2 and in verse 11, we also see they're transparent rather than deceptive. They say in verse 2, well, they're seeking Jesus so that they can worship him, so that they can pay him homage. And what happens in verse 11? When they meet the Christ child, they bow down and worship him. They pay him homage. Their talk is consistent with their actions. They are not trying to get something out of Herod. They're not trying to necessarily manipulate anything out of Mary and Joseph or the Christ child. They're trying to honor the Christ child for who he is, born King of the universe. And they respect and submit to power and authority. Look, they're kings. They're wise men. And they're bowing down to other people. Usually when you have people of power and influence, they don't expect other people to show any difference to them. They just kind of respect each other and nod. But these kings come and they bow down, they prostrate themselves before a baby that, for all intents and purposes, doesn't even know they're there. And then they give extravagant gifts. They wisely use their resources. Those gifts in verse 11, they are in a way symbolic of the greatness of Christ. And the frankincense and myrrh are incenses that were commonly offered, commonly used in the burial of someone. So there's a little bit of foreshadowing that's going on there. But all three of them are extravagant gifts. And all three of them become resources for Joseph and Mary to be able to escape from Herod. All three of them become resources for them to use to raise this child. And so God is making a way through these kings, even these Gentile kings. In verse 12, we also see how they are respecting the power and authority, because when they hear the angel's warning, they don't question it. They don't challenge it. They don't try to get all big and puffy and say, well, we gave our word to Herod. We're men of our word, and we need to go back and tell him where this child is. We've got to do this. They know that the angel represents a higher authority, and they need to be obedient to that higher authority. And so they do exactly what's going on there. And then I think in that we see another element that really tags them as wise men. And that is they understand obedience. They understand when it's time to do what you're supposed to do, and they're unafraid to do it. We see that all through this, don't we? In verse 1, they saw the star. They knew what it meant. They were obedient. They went to go honor. In verses 2 through 9, they respected Herod's authority. Even though Herod was abusive and manipulative, they honored that. And in verse 12, they respect God's warning, and they rejected Herod's command. At some point, we're going to be able to see the Skit Guy's video. And one of the things that it talks about is the main part of the little narrative is that some people questioned why he chose this particular fella to be the wise man. And then in the video, you realize why he's chosen. And it's because he realizes he's not center stage in his life or in the Christmas story. The Christ child is. He works to make everybody else that's in the play be at their best, and he shows some compassion to them, even though he's not perfect. He's kind of a know-it-all. Wisdom is knowing enough that we are not meant to be the center of the stage at Christmas. You know, if you look at the nativity that we have here, or any other nativity, you realize there's one person who is in the very center. And everyone else is oriented around him. Even if we had an angel in the Christmas nativity, the angel is oriented so that it shows deference to what? The Christ child. The drive-through that we went through last night, when you got around to the manger, it was Mary and Joseph and the babe and the star above. The three kings were off at a distance, and you could see them out there. The animals are back over here in their stalls. And the center of attention was that Christ child. Every nativity has Christ at the center. And wise men understand that. Nobody has a nativity scene where the wise men are displayed as the focal point. That's because the glory of the story is the one who is at the center, rather than those who are in the periphery. All the people and pieces surround Jesus, including the wise men. And wise people understand this. Only a fool would think that the glory of Christmas is about someone other than Christ. Christmas is not about Herod. It's not about Santa or Scrooge or the Grinch that tries to steal it. Sorry, Madeline, she loves that video. And it's awesome. And those stories are fun, and there are ways to celebrate the season. However, Christmas is always first and foremost about Jesus being the very center of our lives. And in the nativity scene, we have a picture of how our lives ought to be oriented. All of the functional roles that bring the Christ child into the world are there centered on Christ. And a wise person would never be so foolish to presume that she or he or you or I were ever meant to be the center stage of God's story. Only a fool would take the spotlight meant for someone else. What Christmas reminds us to do is to relax, to choose to be in the background, where we're meant to be in the story. That's the greatest story that's ever told, the story of Christ. And we put our attention and our focus on the Christ child and on Christ who guides us and leads us. And we find contentment and joy because we have a place in the story, but the story's not about us. We realize we're on the side and not in the center. We may find ourselves on bended knee before the King, offering gifts to worship, to live our lives in service to Him. We may be people who consistently seek Jesus out and do our best to point others to Him as we serve and share what we do know. Jesus is the center of the story. Let's live out that for His glory as we tell the story of Christmas this year. As we come to a time of invitation, I want to encourage you to stand with me. And I want you to think about answering this simple question. In this story and in your life, are you more of a wise guy like Herod, trying to manipulate yourself into that center stage of even your own life and the lives of those around you? Or are you more like the wise men, and you've learned that Jesus is center stage, and you need to bow and worship before Him? Heavenly Father, as we have this time of invitation, I just ask that you would move the Holy Spirit among us, and that we would make a decision this morning to put you first and foremost in our lives, to take this season to see the true glory of Christmas and to worship and adore you and to exalt you above everything else in our lives. And not just at Christmas, but throughout the whole year. Lord, if there's someone here who's never recognized you as their King, never recognized you as their King and asked you to be their Savior, I pray they would choose today to bow down and to worship you. Maybe there's somebody here this morning who says, you know, I kind of been nudging the Christ child out of the way and been trying to take some of the limelight in my own life. And I realize now that's a mistake. And I need to put Christ back at the center of my life. Lord, if there's somebody like that here today, Lord Father, I pray they would say to you right now, Lord, I need you to be the center of my life. Here's the throne of my life. Come and be seated here, Lord. However your Spirit might be speaking to us, let us be wise men and women and obey how you lead us. All these things we pray in your Son's name. thank you all for being here today. A couple of quick announcements. One is we do need a few people to help out today with the Ask Ministry. If you can do that, please be here at 2:30, and we'll be meeting back here in the fellowship hall. You can come in these glass doors. We'll have that open for you to come in through there. But we do need some help with that. Whitney's not going to be able to be with us today, so we need some help with that as well. Continue to bring food in for the backpack program, and we'll be taking that this week, what we have, and distributing that to our schools here. I've already talked to you a little bit about the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. And then also next Sunday afternoon, we're going to be delivering fruit baskets to some of our shut-ins and a few other people in our church community and kind of surrounding that. We're going to, like we do every year. If you want to help with that, we're going to put those together during part of Sunday school next Sunday morning, and then we'll be giving those baskets to individual families to take and deliver those to different homes. And so just check in with us, and we'll probably leave from here next Sunday morning with those fruit baskets, and you'll have an assignment for that. If you know of anybody that needs one, or you would like to see somebody receive one, let me know, let Sherry know, let Jared know, and we'll make sure that they get one. We've got about, would you say 13 on our list right now. So all the usual suspects are on there. But if we need to add some more, we'll certainly go forward from that. I also want to say I appreciate all the people that helped lead and worship. But Leandra and Nicholas and Madeline have helped me a whole lot with the production, especially of the videos. And I know they're tired of me because I wear them out. You know, being the preacher is one thing, but to have to be a director's kid on top of all that helped me put all that together. I really appreciate the work that all three of you do to help me with that. That's really, really very much appreciated. Any other announcements that we need to make?
Brother Robert, if a few of the young boys will help get Brenda out with the backpack stuff for Hot Seat.
Excellent. Get a couple of volunteers, young men, to just follow Miss Brenda, and she'll show you where her car's going to be at, and then we'll get that taken care of. Anything else? All right, for our benediction today, we're going to continue as we've been doing the last several weeks, and we're going to sing "Surely the Presence of the Lord is in this Place." Hope you guys have a wonderful week. Peace be with you.